First, it goes without saying that we must hold Donald Trump, his administration, and the entire Republican Party, who control the White House, control the Senate, control the U.S. House. We are going to hold them accountable for their disastrous policies. These policies have devastated working families in Texas, in Vermont, and all over the country. We are going to hold them to account. This administration, among many other actions, decided, if you can believe it, that it was appropriate to provide $1 trillion in tax breaks to the top 1%. And then to use that money to throw 15 million Americans off the health care they desperately need. And let me tell you something that has not been talked about much. When you throw 15 million people off health care, when people can't get to a doctor when they should, people by the thousands are going to die from that horrendous decision. And that is why, together, we're going to roll it back. But it's not just health care. Trump administration made the largest cuts to education in American history. As a result, 7 million Americans will be forced to pay $4,000 a year more on average on their student loan payments. And 1 in 4 student loan borrowers are expected to go into default by the end of the summer. We want our kids to have a great education, not to be forced to default on their loans. At a time when millions of kids are going hungry in America, Trump made the largest cuts to nutrition assistance in American history, literally taking food out of the mouths of hungry kids. You don't take food out of the mouths of hungry children and give tax breaks to billionaires. That's not what this country is about. Trump ripped up the union contracts of 1 million federal workers. He denied overtime pay to over 4 million workers. Trump abolished humanitarian aid that will lead to the deaths of millions of the poorest children on this planet by 2030. And here in the U.S., Trump's domestic army, ICE, has acted brutally and illegally, tearing parents away from their kids and deporting millions of people who lived and worked in this country for decades. He has destroyed the lives of tens of thousands of people, and we're going to address that issue as well. And then after all of the cuts in health care, in education, in nutrition, he wants to spend another $500 billion on a bloated military budget. Those are not the priorities of the American people. Trump, during his campaign, promised no more endless wars. You remember that? And then started an unprovoked war against Iran in which thousands of innocent men, women, and children have been killed. Gas prices are now the highest in years, and taxpayers are going to have to spend hundreds of billions of dollars on this disastrous war. But it's not just Trump's terrible policies. The American people are tired of a president who is a pathological liar, who is an authoritarian personality who wants more and more power in his own hands, as he ignores the Constitution and the rule of law, who is a narcissist, who, if he had his way, would probably name every building in America after himself, who is a kleptocrat, corrupt kleptocrat, who accepts a $400 million luxury plane from Qatar and then makes deals with countries in the Middle East and around the world which benefit his family's wealth. My friends, it is important that we hold Trump and his administration accountable for the disastrous policies they have imposed on the American people. But I have to tell you, that is not enough. It is not enough to be anti-Trump and to simply campaign against Trump. The American people are hurting. They want to know what, in fact, is going on in this crazy and unprecedented moment in American history. They want to know what the Democratic Party stands for and what the Democratic Party is going to do to improve their lives when it gains power. And by the way, what I have seen is I have traveled this country and we have held dozens and dozens of rallies from one end of America to the other. And what I have seen in recent primary elections is that the American people do not want establishment status quo policies that tinker around the edges. The American people understand that this country is facing major crises, and they want bold proposals to improve their lives and the lives of their children. So let me do something this evening that is radical. You ready for a radical idea? All right. Are you really ready? I'm going to tell you the truth. I'm going to tell you some stuff that you don't see in the corporate media and you hear very rarely in the halls of Congress. And that is that while the vast majority of the American people are struggling to put food on the table, pay for health care, pay for housing, pay for child care and education, the wealthiest people in our country have never, ever had it so good. In fact, never before in American history have so few people held so much wealth and so much power. A quick history lesson. You all remember we studied in high school the Gilded Age. You remember that? It was the age of Rockefeller, J.P. Morgan, Jay Gould, and Carnegie, and these guys were very, very, very rich. It turns out that today, when you look at the people at the top of the economic ladder, the very few, the concentration of wealth in America today is 4 times greater than it was during the Gilded Age. 4 times greater. And that disparity is getting worse. After receiving the largest tax break in history from Trump, some 900 billionaires in our country became $2.2 trillion richer. 900 people since Trump is in office, $2.2 trillion richer. In other words, the gap between the very, very rich and everybody else is getting wider and wider. Never before in our history have we had as much income and wealth inequality as we have today. Today, the top 1% owns more wealth than the bottom 93%. Today, one man, Elon Musk, a trillionaire, Elon Musk owns 3 times more wealth than the bottom 50% of American households. Did you understand what I just said? One man owns 3 times more wealth than the bottom half of American society. CEOs of American corporations, big corporations now make 350 times what their average worker makes. But it is not just income and wealth inequality. Never before in American history have we had as much concentration of ownership in our economy as we have today. Handful of giant corporations control one sector after another sector, and their monopolistic practices drive up prices. But it's not just income and wealth inequality and concentration of ownership. Never before in American history have we seen so much billionaire and corporate ownership of our media. In the U.S. today, 6 large media conglomerates control about 90% of what the American people see, hear, and read. Trump's supporters have recently bought up CBS, and they will soon own CNN. Musk and his fellow billionaires own many of the major social media platforms. And as bad as all of that is, let me tell you what is even more dangerous. And that is today, the billionaires and their super PACs are undermining our democracy and increasingly control the political process in our country. Here's the truth. You want to run for office, you want to run for local office, you want to run for state office, you want to run for Congress. And you get involved in a campaign, you say, I'm going to stand up for the working class of this country. And you run a good campaign. You know what happens to you? The billionaires and their super PACs will spend tens of millions of dollars to defeat you. That is not democracy. And that is why together, not only are we going to end this disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decision, but we're going to get super PACs out of the political process. Bottom line, we are now living in a moment in American history where a tiny number of billionaires are exerting unprecedented influence over our society. And let me tell you something, these are not nice guys. They are extremely greedy and ruthless and will do anything they can to accumulate even more wealth and power. You might think that if you had $10 billion, that might be enough. Not for these guys. They want more and more and more, and they will step on anyone in order to achieve their goals. And while the very richest people in this country become richer, what is going on with the American working class? And I think all of you know the answer.
Bernie Sanders just walked onto that stage and made one thing clear. This wasn't just another anti-Trump speech. According to Sanders, America is reaching a breaking point, and he believes both the government and the economy are serving the wealthy while ordinary families are paying the price. He starts by saying that Donald Trump, his administration, and Republicans who control Washington should be held responsible for policies that Sanders argues have hurt working Americans. His first target is health care. Sanders claims that huge tax cuts for the wealthiest Americans came at the expense of millions of people who rely on medical coverage. He argues that when families lose access to doctors and treatment, the consequences aren't just financial, they can become life or death. But he says healthcare is only the beginning. According to Sanders, education has also taken a massive hit. He argues that student loan borrowers are being pushed deeper into debt, with millions expected to struggle under higher payments. Instead of helping young people build their future, he says the system is trapping them before they even get started. Then he shifts to hunger. Sanders claims nutrition programs have been cut, while tax benefits continue flowing to billionaires. His message is blunt. A country shouldn't be choosing between helping hungry children and rewarding its richest citizens. From there, he expands the criticism. He points to labor issues, immigration enforcement, humanitarian aid, and military spending, arguing that government priorities are backwards. In his view, ordinary workers and struggling families keep making sacrifices while Washington spends money elsewhere. But then the speech changes. Sanders says simply criticizing Donald Trump isn't enough. He argues that voters don't just want politicians who oppose someone, they want leaders with a real plan for improving everyday life. And that's where he introduces what he calls the bigger problem. According to Sanders, the real issue isn't only one president, it's the growing concentration of wealth and power in America. He points to billionaires becoming even richer, while many Americans continue struggling with housing, health care, education, childcare, and rising costs. In his view, economic inequality has reached levels never seen before in modern American history. To make that point, Sanders compares today's economy with America's Gilded Age, the era of Rockefeller, Carnegie, and J.P. Morgan. His argument is striking. He says today's concentration of wealth is even greater than it was during that period, creating a system where a small group of people hold extraordinary financial influence, while millions fight just to pay their monthly bills. And then he turns his attention to corporate power. According to Sanders, giant corporations dominate entire industries, reducing competition and making life more expensive for consumers. He also argues that media ownership is increasingly concentrated in the hands of a few wealthy individuals and companies, giving them enormous influence over public opinion. But perhaps his strongest criticism is aimed at campaign finance. Sanders argues that billionaires and super PACs have gained too much influence over American elections. In his view, candidates who challenge powerful interests often face overwhelming amounts of money designed to defeat them before voters even get the chance to decide. His message is simple. If money controls politics, then ordinary Americans lose their voice. By the end of the speech, Sanders isn't just talking about Donald Trump anymore. He's talking about what he believes is a system where wealth creates political power protects wealth, and working families are left behind. Whether people agree with his conclusions or completely reject them, one thing is difficult to ignore. This wasn't simply a campaign speech. It was Sanders' argument that America's biggest battle isn't between Republicans and Democrats. According to him, it's between concentrated wealth and ordinary working people. And that's the question he leaves hanging over the entire country. Who is Washington really working for? The billionaires at the top, or the millions of Americans trying to make it through another paycheck?